feel like my purpose is to be able to talk for those that those of the male kind that can't talk.
Burney on Trickstar Radio.
That one is Neighbours by the wonderful Jarki Monno. Before that we had Coffee and Rain. At this point in your career, do you feel like you were really getting into like your storytelling bag?
Yeah, massively, bro. I think like Neighbours is like one of like 6 or 7 songs off a project called Could Be Something, Probably Nothing that I released last around May time, I'm pretty sure. And I think this was a point in my life where I had a lot of sort of like just questions at like life. It sounds bare deep, but I just had loads of questions about so many things, and the only way, if I couldn't find answers for them, like the only way I could do it was just put it into music.
Yeah.
And I think like the project covers like a whole load of topics, from sort of like grieving to sort of relationships to sort of family, and it sort of covers loads of topics that I was going through at the time. And Neighbours was it was actually the final song that I wrote for the mixtape, and I had like 5 of the songs ready, but we just needed something else like in there. And one night I just started like playing the sort of the dum 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 chord, like the sort of plucky, and I was like, that's it. I was massively into like my Mac Miller at the time as well. Yeah. Like that's where I proper like not discovered him, but just was proper into him. And like I think that like that song specifically is massively sort of influenced by him and inspired like by what he left behind, because he was just such an incredible musician. And yeah, like once I think I wrote that in about one day probably. It didn't take me long, just because it all flowed out of me. And that's sort of the story of, I'm sort of telling my story through my neighbours at the time. Like they lived in the flat above me, and I'd always hear them arguing. And like there was one night, it says it in the lyrics, but I could just remember her being like, I just want to go home. And at that point in time, I was in the exact same boat. I was in this flat that was mine, but I didn't feel at peace there and at rest. And like when she said that, and it just really stood out to me, that one line. And just telling that story through like my neighbour's eyes. And it was just, it's just probably my favourite song off of that mixtape.
I suppose like it must be so interesting for you as a songwriter to kind of find these ways of portraying your message through things you've experienced and through almost like characters. Like if it was a story, they'd be characters in it, but they're people you've really experienced. And I feel like that kind of theme of storytelling carries on massively into Boys Still Cry, which we're going to spin next. Talk to me about this track, because it wasn't the first one I heard of yours, but like after listening to like your whole discography that's been released so far, like this for me is a real standout for a number of reasons.
Yeah, bro, I think like this was a point of where I think this is where I understood it, because we came out of COVID and I was really deflated in the sense of like I dropped the mixtape, and it the mixtape was more like a personal thing for me, just to get off my chest and sort of deliver to people with like, I hadn't seen people in a while, like they could listen to that and understand where I've been for the past 2 years in my mind space. And I just remember one day being in the car park of at the flat I lived in Brighton, and I felt so lost. I remember I called my mum and my sister, and I was like, I just don't know what my purpose is. Like here, like right now at this point in time, I don't know what my purpose is and what I'm gonna do. And I remember like I talked about it for hours, and they really settled me about it. And I went inside, and I just started writing. I felt really like upset, and I was playing my guitar, and I loved that. I loved the opening line of that chorus. Is like, I don't want to drop this mood if it helps me through. And it's that thing of like being sad was comfortable, and it was sort of bit by bit. I just like the song just sort of started to write itself, and like literally from that day, like we briefly touched upon earlier, like I feel like my purpose is to be able to talk for those that like those of the male kind that can't talk, and it just really. Just especially after the last 2 years, and I felt so deflated. It really just gave me a burst of energy that I hadn't had before, and I didn't need anybody else to tell it. Like I sort of finally like figured it for myself at that point in time, and it's just I think the lyrically like what it touched upon, but the beat is like. They're so different, but they work. Like they're really sad lyrics, but the beat and the instrumental is so uplifting, but it just works together. Then it's certainly probably up there. My top three favourite songs I've written.
100%. I was going to mention the contrast between the beat and the lyrics, but I'm glad you touched on it because it's a really interesting tool to have such a upbeat instrumental, but such like raw, honest lyrics, and I think. Where that song was probably like part of a process, whether that's a healing process or just processing life in general for you, the end product is so organic and so honest that I know there'll be people out there when they hear it or when they go back and listen to it that it becomes part of their healing process as well.
Yeah, bro, and I really hope so. I've had a fair few people message me like saying that already, and it's such an amazing feeling. This was written around the time like where I was really into my Sam Fender. Like that was where this was a period where I was right into him and get like what he touched on, and I think it like again you can sort of hear the influence in it from like that bit, like the beat of the like that sort of that chugging type beat. It's in quite a few of his stuff, and like it was just like really heavily influenced by him. But yeah, I think I really hope it does, like you say, if people listen to it now or if people stumble across it, like I really hope that it can sort of just help them in some way if they need it at that given time.
100%, because obviously it's such a prevalent topic as well, like men's mental health, specifically young men. And, you know, I'm sure you and me have been through our own personal battles or whatever, but yeah, like I say, it takes strength, it takes courage, and obviously talent to be able to construct such a coherent piece of work from a mindset that can be really difficult to process. So we're going to spin it now. Do you want to give it a little introduction for the people out there?
Yeah, nice one. So this is my second latest single I released. This is Boys Still Cry. Hope you enjoy.
You're locked into the 10 till 12 show with Burney and Jarki Monno. This is Boys Still Cry.
Burney on Trickstar Radio.